Welcome to Orbicle Times Podcast, and hello to everyone, whatever part of the globe you're from or happen to reside in. My name is Kelly Jo, and here we'll provide armchair conversations gathered from interviews and research reviews to explore the seen, the unseen, and the in-between of the supernatural paranormal phenomena, with topics that circle around spirit orbs, NDEs, OBEs, UFOs, time slips, mystical moments, higher consciousness, and more. I hope that this cast will be our meeting place and judge-free zone where we can explore, learn, and grow through the telling of. This cast will be launched on a monthly basis or a bi-weekly schedule whenever I'm able to make contact with those in the know for their telling of. Speaking of those in the know and the telling of, have you had mystical moments or other supernatural paranormal experiences? Care to share on this cast? Then consider stepping into the light with your telling of, or send in your monologue for me to read on this podcast. Simply email orbicletimespodcast@gmail.com for a chance to contribute to this cast.
And then suddenly, this was a whole new experience. There was a voice in my head. We wanted to show you what we looked like. Are you ready to see us? And then I got very scared because I thought to myself, oh my goodness, these are extraterrestrials, coming to you through this ball of light, but we're going to show you what we look like. And once I saw the eye, I lost it. I was completely horrified. And I started in my head, I started to scream, no, 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 I don't want to see you. I don't want to see you. No, 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 stop, 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 stop. No, 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 like that.
In this 9th episode of Orbicle Times, Amber Tawn, fellow orb-ologist, joins me for the telling of her supernatural paranormal encounters, which circles around her seeing orbs of light at night beginning around the age of 2, plus her paranormal encounters at the Morris Jumel Mansion in Washington Heights area, New York City, preceded by her contact with what she describes as a collective consciousness that she calls Lavender Moon, which was her inspiration and muse for her penning of a book entitled The Art of Cosmic Creation, and how this consciousness began to show itself as an ET. Plus, we talk taro. So, without further ado, here is that interview. A warm welcome to you, and thank you for taking your time to join us here at Orbicle Times. It's a fantastic opportunity for me to speak with you again, Amber.
Thank you, Kelly Jo. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, I'm going to have a couple of questions for you. So here we go. Because this cast has orb as its foundation, and because that is how you and I found each other, Amber, through our common interests in orbs, my fellow orbologist. Sorry, I hope you don't mind that name.
No, I like it.
Okay. Let's begin by discussing orb topics, and then we can circle back to your paranormal encounters, which might or might not include a UFO. Not sure. We'll find that out. And then touch on the art of cosmic creation. And if I hope time allows, let's deal with the topic of tarot. So, how does that sound to you?
Sounds great.
Okay. So, my first question for you is, can you recall your first time seeing an orb or orbs? And if you want to expand on that incident.
Yes, I can. I remember, as you said in the introduction, being 2 years old. And I know that I was 2 years old or about 2.5 because my brother wasn't born yet. He was born when I was 2.5. So I do still have memory right around that time because I actually remember, looking at my mother's stomach and saying, like, why is your stomach so big, Mommy? So I have clear memory at that age, which is really interesting. So I remember going to bed at night, and I used to sleep in the same room as my parents. And so I would watch these orbs of light that would float around and go around me. And I remember just like lying next to my parents. I was in the middle and just like enjoying it. I would just watch them, and I didn't know what they were, but since I was with my parents, I wasn't scared. I was like 2.5 or 2. I didn't have any word for it. Just watched it. So that was pretty cool. I was just watch it and fall asleep looking at them. And then I remembered the shift when my parents suddenly I was put into my own room. I remember this very vividly. I lied down to go to sleep, and my parents left the room, and I saw them flying around me, over me. And I suddenly realized that I didn't know what they were, and I was all alone, and they were flying around me. And so I began screaming, and I didn't know, I had no words for them at that point. I called them flies because they flew around me. And so I started screaming, there are flies around me. There are flies. Get the flies away from me, because like something just hit me in that moment that I was alone. It was something about being alone because I wasn't scared of them before. And then I started just screaming. And I remember my parents running in and my father trying to explain to me that, like, he was asking me, like, what do these flies look like? And I was saying they're round and they're light. And he was saying I was probably looking at the light bulb, and then he turned off the light, and I was seeing that, that spot that we have if we stare at a light bulb. And I was like, no, that's not what happened. I wasn't looking at the light bulb, and they're flying here and there. And, they just thought I was 2 and just being scared because it was my first time in my new room. And I clearly remember, and my father remembers this, that soon after that, they began getting me toys of flies because they were trying to get me over my fear of flies. And I was like wondering why I'm getting all these toy flies. And they were like, I remember them talking over me and being like, well, she's playing with them fine. She doesn't seem to be scared of them. So that was my first memory. And I still remember I named my toy fly Leisha the fly. So, but that was not the fly I was talking about.
Now, what or who do you think orbs are?
I believe that orbs are many different things. And I think that I know that there are other dimensions close to ours. And I don't really know that I'm explaining it correctly, but let's say other dimensions where there are forms and things in different frequencies that are very close to ours or intersect with ours. And I believe that when we see those things through our perspective in this dimension, we see many of those things as orbs of light. I do believe that these orbs can be interdimensional beings. I do
Yes.
believe that they can be what we call spirits. I do even believe they could be other people on the astral plane, as well as many other things that I'm sure I can't fathom at this time.
Okay. What do you think their composition is?
I don't know, but what was really interesting is some of my encounters with orbs. They do seem to emit some electromagnetic charge. Because I had my most profound interaction where I had lots of proof was in a place called Morris Jumel Mansion. And I went there just for fun for my brother's birthday. And that is in New York City. It's an old historical mansion that you could visit. It's a museum, and they do, if for a price, they do open it up at night for paranormal investigation, that you can have a private tour where you could sit down and they'll bring the equipment. Now, I had no equipment at that point to bring except for my own camera. And at that point, I didn't know anything about orbs. I'd seen them, and I had said to myself, well, they're just hypnagogic hallucinations or hypnopompic. I forget which one's which. And I kind of pushed it out of my mind until that night when I went for my brother's birthday. And I thought, he's into history and I like paranormal stuff, so this should be fun. And the people there had the what are those called? The readers that show the electromagnetic.
EMF?
That's it. They had the EMF detectors, and they had motion sensors. And then I had my camera, and they had some other stuff too, and I had my camera.
So just to clarify, there is the spot where you can go, but they provide the equipment or some equipment for their clients?
Yes, they
That's
provide the
great.
equipment. You could bring your own equipment too, and they ask you, would you like us to bring our equipment as well? And I didn't have any. It was the first time I ever went, as they call it, ghost hunting.
Mm-hmm.
So I really had no equipment. So when they had those EMF detectors, so the first thing that happened was that the motion sensor was going on and off.
Yeah.
And then the cat toys that we had,
Yay.
we used to, were also going on and off. At the same time, the EMF detector was going on and off. And this is all in the same spot.
Mm-hmm.
It's not different. It's in the same spot where the light's going off, the motion sensor, the cat ball, and the EMF detector. So something was clearly happening there.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I'm seeing like flickering lights and shadows, as I normally always do and have my whole life, but kind of like push it out of my mind, like, oh, you're just seeing whatever at your eye. And I remember I had my camera and I was like, I'll just take a picture. And I took a picture, and hovering right over the motion sensor was an orb. Oh my God, look. And my brother went, oh my goodness. And I said, I still see it. I shoved my camera in my brother's hand and I ran over to where I saw it. I said, quick, take a picture again. And he took a picture, and there was me, and the orb had moved to another place, and it had a tail, like it was in movement.
Yes. What kind of camera did you have at that time? Do you recall?
It was not a cell phone.
Okay.
It was a digital camera.
With a flash?
With a flash.
Okay.
So it took a very clear picture, and we saw it in different parts hovering around the same area where the motion detector was going off. In that moment, something clicked for me. And so there's the electromagnetic energy, because there's something with the flash and lights refracting or pushing back on photons. What else they're made of, I couldn't say. But in that moment, that's when like a veil dropped in my mind, and I knew, like, oh my God, this is real. Like, everything I've been seeing is real. This is actually happening.
So would you say that that was one of the first times that I guess you would identify these light sources or light beings as orbs?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And you answered one of my questions, which was, what did you take first, video or photo of an orb?
Photo.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. And so what happened that night anyways, after that?
So there was a lot of activity, and through the night, I took many, many photos of orbs throughout the whole house. And I just kept looking to see where I would see a flash or a flicker, and I'd take a picture, and there it was continuously. And then after that, I decided, I said, wait a minute, like, I wake up every night, almost every night without fail, since I'm young, and I see something hovering over me. This time, I'm going to keep my camera next to my bed. And so I kept my camera next to my bed, and it was either that very night or the next night where I woke up and I saw what I saw, and I took a photo, and there were 4 orbs of light around my bed.
When was this?
This was either that night or the following night.
Wow.
It was right after. It was immediately after, because I said, oh my goodness, like, this is real. And then I kind of actually, I got a little upset for a moment, because I had this realization that I had been denying what I had been seeing, like denying my own experience.
Yeah, over the previous years is what you're talking about.
Yeah, since I was 2, I was like, I told myself that what I was seeing wasn't real, and I got like emotional over that. I was like, I didn't believe myself.
Approximately what year was this? Was this
Okay.
before 2018?
It was probably just the beginning of 2018. the end of
Okay.
2017, beginning of 2018.
Okay. Am I correct in this assumption that it was in 2018 when you had a spiritual channeling experience with something that you identify as a collective consciousness?
Yes.
Is that correct? And that collective you named Lavender Moon. A side note, I hope to keep this cast a commercial-free zone. In light of that, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. Simply type into your search engine Orbicle Times, and you should see both my channel's name, Spirit Orb Sightings, plus that of my webpage, orbicletimes.com, which will also grant you access to my YouTube videos and other webpage content. If you've already subscribed, many thanks.
That I would just push it off as just not real. And I said, oh my goodness, this is real. A whole new world opened up for me. And then from that moment, after I took the picture around my bed, I said, well, what if because my son was about 2 years old. So I said to myself, well, my baby monitor has night vision. What if I use that? What if I see if I could see something through the night vision? And there it was over my bed. I woke up in the middle of the night and I saw, as per the usual, my whole life of this thing flying over me in the darkness. So I know I'm not seeing a fly. I know I'm not seeing something because I would have to have pretty good eyesight to see a fly in the dark with
In the dark.
curtains
Mm-hmm.
and no light on.
Do you have a sense, Amber, that what you were seeing was the same entity or entities?
At that moment, now looking back, I do feel it was the group of the same entities or
Okay.
entity. They seem to work as one. But
As
at
one,
that
eh?
point,
Mm-hmm.
I had no communication with it yet. And so that led me to the next part of my journey. And this all happened within a couple of weeks. I would say 3-4 weeks.
Wow.
From going to Morris Jumel Mansion. Suddenly I was like, these things are hovering over me at night. Like, what's going on? And I began to get pretty scared because I didn't know what it was about. And so I started to get scared of them. I had a moment where I very clearly remember I was riding to work and I was sitting on the subway. And I was like, what is the point of all of this? And I kind of said a prayer in my head. I said to whoever, whatever is listening to me, in my head, I said, so I could see these balls of light. And so what? Like, what do I do with this? What's
right.
the point? And I had this moment of like pointlessness. Like, what's the purpose in all of this? Like, why did I go? Why am I seeing these things since I'm little? Like, are they just like energetic, like actually like flies? Like they're not intelligent, they just fly around and I happen to be able to see them and there's just no point to all of this?
Mm-hmm.
Or is there something else? And I had this moment of like, kind of like every paradigm that I had or the way that I saw the world kind of like fell apart in that moment. And I felt very low and kind of like lost. And that's when I got my answer. Not in that moment. And now I'm trying to, some weird things happen in the next few days from that.
Such as?
And the first thing that happened was, I'm not going to tell too much of this because I was validated because my biggest question was, what am I interacting with? Is it even conscious? Is it even intelligent? And so I was sitting in my classroom, and actually during that whole day, I kept smelling roses in my nose, and like I could almost taste them. And I was like, what is going on? Like someone must be walking around with rose perfume, but it was so in my face. And I remember I was sitting at lunch, and again, I got the smell of roses in my face. And all of a sudden, I had like a vision.
Mm.
And it wasn't where I went like unconscious or anything. It was like I wasn't controlling my thoughts, and all of a sudden a whole bunch of pictures went into my head at the same time that I smelled the roses, and I saw someone that I worked with. It was a superior, someone that was superior in position to me, like a boss, and it was like a message for them. And I said, "Am I supposed to tell this person something?" You know, I was like, "I will be fired." Like, what do I had been carrying my camera around with me. And I said, "Okay." I said, "If you are really here and you are that same thing and you're around me and you are actually like, this was a way you're communicating with me, then I'm going to put my camera in this direction." So I didn't see it. I put my camera in a certain direction. I said, "You need to appear now." And I said, "Or I'm not delivering this message." And I said it out loud. And I took the picture, and directly in front of my camera was a very clear orb. Straight center, dead center. And I said, "Oh my goodness."
So you took that obviously as a clear message that
Yes.
that your query was answered.
My query was answered. They are intelligent and they were communicating with me.
Hmm.
And I didn't know it because it was so subtle. It feels like my own thoughts.
Now, even when after that happened, did you doubt it?
So I was like, "Oh yes," I kept doubting it again and again and again, but I had confirmation. So I actually got on the phone from my office. I called down to my superior and I said, I don't even know what I said. I babbled, but I said, "Are you free for a moment? This has nothing to do with work. Can I come down there?" I went down there, and the whole time I'm like, "I'm going to be fired. Like, this person's going to think I'm crazy. I don't even know what the message means." I saw a bunch of visuals and a name, and I went down and I delivered the message.
So you saw visuals, and then you were able to interpret those visuals.
Well, not really. I gave the visuals as I saw them.
I see.
They were kind of meaningless to me. Some of them were very religious in nature, so I didn't really understand the meaning of some of them or the meaning of the names that I was getting.
So symbols?
Symbols, pictures of the person with roses around them, and then a specific name, and then a specific rosary, and different things that I don't want to give too much because it was very personal to that person. And
absolutely.
They are my superior. So but it was very detailed. So I was able to give a detailed message.
And how did they respond to that?
That person began crying and said that they had just been praying a moment ago about that particular thing that I saw. And the specific name that I gave was directly related to that prayer and to exactly what they were praying about. And it wasn't a simple name like Jesus or Mary. So it wasn't one of those names that I could have guessed. It was something else, or John or Paul. It was something else. She was just like, "You couldn't have known that." And I showed the picture. I said, "This is the picture. I want to give you a copy. I don't know, oops, sorry for that noise."
That's okay.
And so that was validated to me. I went upstairs to my office and I said, "Oh my God, you're real." And that's when I started talking back and taking it seriously. And I said, "Okay, what do you want me to do? Like, what am I doing with this?"
When was the initial encounter with this collective consciousness? I mean, when you became aware that it was a collective, when did that occur?
Now that happens right after. So at that moment, I was like, okay, these things are conscious. They're communicating with me. And I remember that very night I went home and I told my brother, and he was like, "What does that mean?" He's like, "Are we like, is that like Catholicism is real? Like, what is it? Like, was Jesus talking? Like, what does it mean?"
Mm-hmm.
We were like, I was like, "I don't think so." I said, "I think that I just had to get, I had the feeling that I just received some symbols that would be meaningful to the person, that would prove that there was something that could communicate information to me. It was a
Mm-hmm.
validation. So I said, so I don't think it was talking about religion specifically. It was meaningful to that person, but it was telling me, like, we're real. This is a validation. The next few nights, I had very intense experiences, such as many orbs moving around and around me, and this feeling of a very strong magnet. And I kept getting the message in my head of, you need to work on your fear. It's your fear that's blocking you. It's your fear. And so the first thing that I got was, it was all pictures, but then it started to be in sentences. In the next few days, once again, this seemed to happen when I was, on lunch, or I was at my free time, my downtime, and I was sitting alone in my office.
Well, that was nice of them.
And it made sense, because
Of course.
I would always say to myself, like, and I would say this to my brother, to my friends, and I would always say, like, I was terrified of aliens, extraterrestrials. And I said, if I ever saw one, I would want it to be daytime while I was at work with lots of people around me.
That's funny.
It made total sense that I was having these experiences at daytime while I was at work. I was sitting at lunch, usually not while I'm eating. It's after lunch. I'm sitting there with myself and just relaxing, digesting. And all of a sudden, this feeling, I saw a flickering of light. That's usually when I see them there. It's a flicker, like a flash.
Like a flash.
Yes.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I had this extremely intense feeling in my chest that is hard to describe. Almost like if you're in an elevator, like in your stomach, that feeling
Yeah.
plane or elevator when you go down?
Yes.
Except it was in my chest, and I got really scared, because I thought, like, oh my goodness, like, maybe I'm having a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what this weird feeling is, and I can't get rid of it. It got very, very strong. And then it started to move up to between my eyes and over my face, and my face started feeling like heat, and like almost as if something was lying across the bridge of my nose. And I couldn't get the feeling out. And then the feeling went into the palms of my hands, and it was super strong. And I was like, what's happening to me? And I started to get really scared. I actually panicked for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, like, do I call someone? Like, maybe this is physical. This is, something's happening to me. All of a sudden, I saw the flash again, and there was like a sentence. It was like my own thoughts, but it was like, pick up your camera and take a picture. And I looked up where the light was, but the light was off. The light was off. I always turn the lights off during my lunch hour, because I'm tired of looking at the fluorescent lights. And up, I saw like the outline of something, like a negative, but very faint. And I picked my camera up to where I saw it, and I took a photo. And there was this basketball-sized orb that I show. It's on the cover of the book, The Art of Cosmic Creation, and I call Lavender Moon. In that moment, a thought came through my head, which was, this will be the cover of the book, the instructions that will tell you, sit down, the feeling in your hand, and now pick up the pen and start writing.
The voice, if you will, the thought that was coming through, was that in your voice, or was it a different male or a female voice coming through? Was it your thought, but from somewhere else?
Felt like my thought, but but I wasn't thinking it. It was like just in like going in through my head without me controlling it, almost as if, like, if I can liken it to something, like when you're having a dream, when you're going to sleep, playing through your head, but you're not controlling them or trying to think them.
Got you. And now, why the name Lavender Moon?
Well, a long time ago, when I started my YouTube channel, I remember I was sitting there and I was like, now what should I call my channel? And then all of a sudden I had like that flicker, that thought in my head that kind of came out of nowhere and said, Lavender Moon, and make a circle over me of like a moon, but make it lavender color. And that's how I made my banner. I was like, okay. I just thought it was I was like, oh, that was weird. I was like, all right, Lavender Moon. And I had a picture of me with this lavender moon that I put over me.
Oh, okay.
In that moment, when I began writing the words, I said, for some reason, this thought came to me. I said, are you Lavender Moon? It actually didn't say yes. What it really said was, you can call us whatever you like. Okay, I'm going to call you Lavender Moon.
Would you say then that this collective, which was one, but a collective, instructed you to start writing the book? Is that called channeling, or would you call that?
I know what it was more like, because I was calling it channeling because I didn't understand really that was my first experience with that. It was more like dictation. Like I was being, these thoughts were streaming through my mind, and I was writing as fast as I could to keep up with them, to take all the notes.
So sort of like a muse.
Yeah, and I would think of them like that. I would say, this must be what a muse is.
Now, do you still think of it as channeling, or now do you sort of think of it towards a muse, an angel on your shoulder?
I do think of it more like an angel on my shoulder, or a trans-dimensional collective on my shoulder.
Yeah, or
Because
spirits, or
at that point, I thought, I was like, oh my goodness, am I becoming a channel? Like, is that what this is?
Mhm.
This was a new experience for me. So I didn't know if I would be like, these people that are channels, and they just start speaking, a voice is speaking through them, and they just do this. But after I was done with the book, it was like they took a step back, and I still feel their presence, but it doesn't come through like that.
Could you offer up, I guess, a Cole's Notes version of what your book is about, The Art of Cosmic Creation?
Yeah. So what the art of cosmic creation is about, or what that is, the art of cosmic creation,
Mm-hmm.
is how we create in the physical. And one of the major things that they showed me is this thing called the continuum of duality. So they showed me, and it was in words, it was in pictures. I drew pictures, and that's what's in the book too, my pictures as well. That we are one, of course. Then this is in other literature. I'm not the first person to write this, but we are one. And then we separate. Oh, I will put that in quotation marks, separate, because there is no separation, through frequency. So they showed me, and I wish I had pictures here to show you, but but you can go to Amazon right now, and you could actually see those pictures.
Okay.
So there was this huge pool of vast consciousness. It looked like a huge ocean to me, that was at one end of the spectrum. And then on the other end was like each individual wave of this mass consciousness was being pulled down, meaning slower, into this physical realm, and being anchored by the ego. And when they talked about the ego, they were showing me like an anchor that was holding one string of consciousness down, like a slinky. If you could think of a
Yes.
slinky, and at one end you're holding one end of the slinky, and you attach a weight to the other end,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes like boom, straight down, and it separates, and it elongates. That's what they showed me. From that, they showed me this continuum of duality, and they showed me that our task on that continuum is to remember that we are part of this collective consciousness, that we are part of the soul, which is, they call the guiding self, and that's a place of unconditional love and acceptance. And when we have a misidentification with the ego, what happens is our focus disconnects from there. And that's where all of our blockages come from in life. Like, and let me say this, that when we have this desire in our life, like each of us have our own, like something that we really desire, or something that we're really attracted to. And it could be things like, it doesn't have to be career. It could be like a group of friends, or an experience that you want to have. They said that those desires that have stayed with you, and those are deep desires, are actually your soul's blueprint for evolution. Your quest towards those things are going to bring up those disconnections from your guiding self, from your soul. And your task is to remember that you are connected.
So, in essence, maybe to fulfill the contract that we agreed to before coming here, if you will.
Yes. What the main message was is that all of our purpose is to expand. And the way that we expand consciousness, and by the way, when we each expand our own consciousness, it expands all consciousness here. And the way to expand our consciousness is to express who we are in our core through our individual lives. That's how we move towards our desire. It's how can I be more of, or express more of who and what I am. And when we do that in every domain of life, like in our relationships, or in the way that we contribute through either our hobbies or our careers or whatever it is, through our physical environment, through our health, through our even our wealth, the way that we do that, or when we're trying to do that, we come up against these thoughts. I am not, like, oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, I don't belong. Oh, I'm not. And those are those points of disconnection. Move past that. And that's what this book is about.
Is it fair for me to say that the art of cosmic creation is about manifesting, which I think that you defined as the practice of living your life as an expression of your soul by aligning your thoughts, feelings, and actions to your true self, the part that is beyond the physical?
Absolutely.
The guiding self. But clarify with me again, is the guiding self the soul?
Yes. So there, the way that I was shown this is that the soul is, it's like it exists on different frequency levels. So that's like the root of it. But it's also, as it slows down, as that one coil of consciousness, as they called it, slows down, it can exist on different levels. So that's that part where we're directly connected to the infinite, is the guiding self. It's like that vast pool connects to the infinite, connects to everything. And then from there we filter down.
Okay. Well, let's touch on manifesting. I mentioned earlier in the opening that you provide techniques to assist with manifesting.
Yes.
You're also the creator of something, and I hope I have this right, called STAR. It's an acronym.
Yes.
Can you tell us what the acronym stands for?
Yes. So the S in the beginning is see beyond the physical. So in the book, it goes into really focusing on the desire, the things that you want to feel, instead of looking to the physical objects and things around you. Because what happens when we do that is that we take our focus from within and we put it externally. And those are ego things. The physical things are not, at the root of everything. They're just the result of everything. So when we put it on, like, oh, I want the house, I want this, I want that, we're putting our focus there instead of internally to the soul, to our core. So it's like, what are the feelings? What is the feeling that you want to feel in that house? You want to drill down what those thoughts, those feelings are, of what it is that you want to experience.
Okay.
See beyond the physical, which is look at your desires. That's what it is.
Okay. Going forward, the T and the A and the R.
Yeah. So the T, that brings us to the T, which is take control of your subconscious.
Okay.
We're kind of all driving on autopilot, as we should. They refer to this body that we're in, this avatar, as the mind-body machine. And it's made to be on autopilot until we become aware that we're on autopilot. And I talk about different ways that I worked with that, and different there is an exercise that I call the haunted house, which is in there. And it's all about how, I I kind of compared it to the metaphor of a haunted house. Our subconscious is like a haunted house. It's just replaying all these old things that happened to us, at different points when we disconnected from our true authentic self, and we just replay them.
So like residual energy.
Like residual energy.
Mm-hmm.
And so take control of your subconscious and take those points of disconnection, reconnect to yourself where you're saying, I am not. You create that I am, and you basically bring love there. That goes to A, which is aligned action. So once you've taken your desire and you've aligned your thoughts to your desire, then what happens is you align your action to that, your behavior. Everything becomes in alignment with your soul, so that everything becomes an expression of your soul. Your behavior becomes an expression of your soul. And then that leads to the last part, which is reinforce results. And this is super important, that as we're moving through this whole thing, you can't be perfect at it. This is a practice. It's a practice. So a practice that goes with that, the last part, reinforcing results, is constantly looking for what you can do, looking for what you do know, instead of looking at what you're not. And when something positive happens, you reinforce it by looking at it and saying, yes, I made one little step further today, that I expressed more of who I am, just a little bit more in those 3 words that I just said, or in this. And it's like a feedback mechanism. And then you're able to express yourself more and more and more and more.
So then would it be fair to say that the method of practical manifestation, you can do that through self-expression? And if so, is that one of your techniques?
Yes. Okay. Self-expression, as from your desire, moves into your thoughts, moves into your feelings, moves into your behaviors, moves into your physical reality.
Is self-expression, equates to creativity? Is that the majority of the time, or am I wrong?
I absolutely agree with you, because the message that's at the core of it is that we are creators. We are creative beings. We are the infinite filtered down, which is pure creation.
Do you think that self-expression is the only way, though, to manifest?
Well, the message that I got is that everything can be self-expression. Every part of your life can be an expression of you.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you meditate in order to contact this collective?
No.
Okay.
I concentrate on what's in the book that I talk about, the spiritual mouth. That was a weird term, but that's the term that they gave me. I went, the spiritual mouth.
Okay. Did you want to explain that, or do you want to leave that for people to read in your book?
Well, I'll explain it just briefly.
Yeah,
in
you
the
can.
beginning,
Thumbnail sketch.
Yeah, thumbnail sketch. When I talked about that intense feeling in my chest.
Yeah.
Up to right between my eyebrows and down the sides of my nose. That never went away. I can turn that on, and I don't know what I'm doing exactly, but I could turn it on and off, so I can make that feeling, and it's very physical. And when I turn it on, that's how I connect to them.
Isn't that interesting? Is that a beacon for them?
I guess so. This is the only part in my writing that is hard for me to explain, because it's a physical feeling. It's an actual physical feeling that I have. I don't picture anything. There are some picturing techniques that they had me practice in the beginning, but I just concentrate there like in a second, and it turns on.
Do you mean explain publicly, or do you mean even explain to yourself?
Yeah, it's hard to explain to others about a feeling that I'm feeling in my body.
But you understand that feeling?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to switch gears here, and I want to talk about some of your paranormal encounters, if that's okay with you.
Yes.
Okay. Can you recall your first paranormal encounter or experience?
Mm-hmm.
The orbs.
Yes, it was the orbs, but the next one that kind of stands out in my mind, as I have had many, was right after my grandfather died. So I was 7 years old. I was going to turn 8 in just a few months because it happened during the summer, and my 8th birthday was going to be in September. So I was still 7. So 7 turning 8. My grandfather died, and it was nighttime. And this was in the days following his funeral. And I was very close to my grandfather because I lived with him. So it was like I had a parent that died. I was very, very upset, of course. And I remember it being evening, and I went down to sit in the kitchen by myself. My grandfather would be the one to wash the dishes. Everyone would go upstairs. My grandmother would cook, and my grandfather would wash the dishes. And that's what he did every night. He'd put on the little light over the sink, and he'd wash the dishes. And it was a nightly game where I would, it was this game where I would pretend I'm sneaking up behind him, which of course he knew I was there, and he'd turn around and go, rah, and I'd laugh and run away. And then I'd come and do it again and again and again until the dishes were clean. And then we'd go upstairs. So I was sitting there staring at the sink with the light, and I was just like very emotional, and I was just thinking like I'm never going to do that again. In that moment, I felt a hand on my shoulder, as clear as day, and I didn't think anything of a spirit or a ghost or anything like that. I thought it was my brother sneaking up behind me.
Wow.
I was so angry because in that moment I was just so torn up and so angry that he was bothering me in this moment when I wanted to be alone and putting his hand on my shoulder and trying to scare me. So I remember I felt it. I paused, and it was still on my shoulder. And I took my hand, and I was going to turn my body and fling it around as fast as I could, and I was going to smack him. And I waited, and the hand was on my shoulder, and then I spun around and I said, Lewis, that's my brother's name. And I flung my hand around, and there was no one there. And in that moment, I couldn't explain it.
Did you tell anybody about that, even if it was some years later?
I told my grandmother, and she just said, wow, I guess it was Grandpa. That's just, I didn't know if she believed me, because she didn't seem like, oh, whoa, she just said, oh, well, yeah, maybe it's great, like matter of factly. So I didn't really know if she believed me or she was just humoring me.
Did he ever come back for another visit?
Yes, I had quite a few dreams after that, until the final dream where he said, I won't be returning.
And do you remember how you reacted in the dream?
Yes. It was very much like real life. It was really interesting. Remember that I'll run through them real quick. I'll just give a few highlights.
Absolutely.
The first one was that I was standing outside, and my grandfather had a Cadillac. So a Cadillac drove up to me, and the window went down, and it was my grandfather. And I said, Grandpa, I said, you're dead. How are you here? You died. And he looked confused for a moment. And then he looked down, he furrowed his eyebrows, and he had this look of realization. He looked back up at me and he said, oh, and he had a faint smile on his face. He shook his head and he said, yeah, that's right. I died.
But he was traveling in style.
He was still in his Cadillac, which he always had. And he said, and I remember this was a super emotional dream. I can only really talk about it now. I always cry when I talk about it, but I think I could do it now. I said, Grandpa, I never got to say goodbye. That's what really got me. Because that day I was in summer camp and I didn't get to say goodbye. He died suddenly.
Okay. He
just had a heart failure and he dropped down and he died. And oh, and by the way, when he died, the grandfather clock that he built stopped.
No.
And I still have it. It stopped.
No.
Yep. Yep. It stopped. So he said, you could say goodbye to me now. That was like very emotional. So I woke up and I was like, that was so real. It was different than a usual dream.
You
And
must have woken up crying.
I did. Yes. Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was crying a lot in the days that followed. And I remembered the next one where I was somewhere in a garden. And I specifically remember that there were deer in the garden. And my grandfather was there. And there was this thing that we used to do in real life where he'd hold on to my hands and he'd go 1, 2, 3, and he'd lift me up. Do it again, do it again. You know, of course, I was little. And so I said, Grandpa, let's play the game. Lift me up. And he said 1, 2, 3, and he'd pick me up. I laughed. And then I was holding onto his hands and I saw he began to like move upward. And I said, do it again. And every time he did it again, he came back down. His feet were just coming up off the ground just a little bit. And when he'd lift me up, he'd come back down. And we were doing this a few times. And suddenly there were people behind me. And I looked behind me and I recognized them from the photos. My great-grandmother, my great-grandfather, on my grandmother's side, and then his parents and some other people were standing behind me, and they said, you have to let go of his hands. You're hurting him. And I said, what do you mean I'm hurting him? And they said, you're not letting him go up. You're holding on to him.
Oh, metaphorically.
Metaphorically. And I was a little kid. So I still, it amazes me because I'm thinking back to this and I'm like, I was 7. I didn't understand these complex, spiritual things.
Sure.
I had no information about it whatsoever. And so I don't even know where I think like, how could I have made this up? And so they explained it to me. They said, you're holding on to him. He has to go up somewhere higher. And when you're holding on to him, he's coming back down. And when you pull him back down, it hurts him. And I said, how can you hurt someone that's dead? And they said, well, you can. And they said, you have to let go so he could go up. And so I let go and he went up. And that was very emotional. And the last one, he came back and he walked through the door and he was with a boy who had red hair. And I still have the boy didn't really talk. I have no idea who this boy is. No one in our family, no one has red hair. And he said, this is my helper. And he said, I just came back to give a final goodbye. He said, I won't be coming back to your dreams again. He said, I have to go on somewhere, and this will be the last time you see me. And that was so clear and so vivid. It was very interesting.
So he brought like a guide with him.
Something like that. I don't know if he was going on with this helper or what. I have no idea. Like waved to me. He didn't say a word. And he just, this is my helper. That's all he said.
Well, those were fantastic stories. That was great. I knew that, first thing is that some people consider UFOs a non-paranormal event. So I guess the prefix need not apply, if you will. Mm-hmm. What umbrella would you put UFOs under? Like paranormal or non-paranormal? And have you yourself seen a UFO?
Yes, I have.
Ooh, do tell.
And yes, paranormal. Well, I'll explain that part. Okay, so this is actually going back to Lavender Moon. Going back to those days that followed me starting to write and nightly visits of these balls of light and fear and these messages of like, we're getting you used to us. It's time to overcome your fear. Fear is an agent of the ego. If you want to move forward and you accept this, you have to get over your fear, which took me quite a while because I'd look at it and then I'd watch it on the the baby monitor and look at it and get scared and run out of the room. I'd get scared continually.
Mm-hmm.
And then one night I had this really crazy experience. I didn't know who Lavender Moon was. And I thought, are you my spirit guides? Are you my mother? Are you my grandfather? Are you my whatever? Like, I was thinking of it from the spiritual realm. I was getting a message of like, no, somewhere else. And I got this feeling of something like extraterrestrial.
Okay.
Dimensional, extraterrestrial. And I didn't want to believe it because that was even more scary. So I kind of like ignored that. I didn't write it down. It's not in my book. I allude to it, but I didn't even write it down. And one night in the weeks that followed when I was going through this experience, the whole experience was about 6 or 7 months straight, by the way, of me
Okay.
writing and writing and writing and visits and balls of light. And, you know, I still do see orbs, but it's not at the frequency that I was at this point. I woke up in the middle of the night. I awoke to someone small sitting on me. And I was kind of like very groggy and waking up, and I thought my 2-year-old son had woken up and crawled on top of me.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I thought. And I kind of get a look, and it looks like this little man.
Oh my.
Like that. And I go, whoa, that's not my son. And I go to sit up, and suddenly I fall flat on the bed and I can't move. And you could say like a sleep paralysis, but the weird thing, and I have had sleep paralysis before.
Okay.
The weirdest thing was that I could move at first. When I went to sit up and sat halfway up, that's when suddenly my whole body went limp. And this small looking man looked at me very closely and said, you don't look very well. I better get her. And in my head, because I couldn't move my mouth, I said, what? No, don't get her. Like, what's happening? You know, I didn't know what that meant. And then all of a sudden, my eyes went blurred. And all I could see was a blue blob in front of me.
Oh, good Lord. Okay.
Something was in front of me. It was all blue. I could see the color, but it was all blurred. And then suddenly, this was a whole new experience. There was a voice in my head. And it wasn't my own thought. It was a distinct, it even felt completely different. And this is the part that kind of like shocked me when I heard the voice, was that it was a woman's voice, and it was like a South Carolina accent or North Carolina accent. It was like this. It said hello, and I forgot what it said because I was so shocked that I can't remember what the first line was that it said to me. But in my head, and I'm talking back to it through my head, it could hear my thoughts. I said, why are you talking like that? And they said, we've scanned your mind. It was something like that. We've scanned you, and we chose the voice that was the least intimidating. I remember that line very clear. I was just in shock, and I said, who are you? What are you? And they said, in that very same voice, Southern accent, we wanted to show you what we looked like. Are you ready to see us? And then I got very scared because I thought to myself, oh my goodness, these are extraterrestrials. Like, whatever this thing is, these are beings. And then it started to like comfort me, but also say, okay, we're gonna show you what we actually look like. Until now, we've been, coming to you through this ball of light, but we're gonna show you what we look like. And I was terrified at that moment. And at first I said, okay. And that moment when I knew that they were extraterrestrial, I remember saying, you're blue. I thought you're supposed to be gray. They didn't answer me. They didn't answer that. And suddenly my eyes began to get a little clearer and a little clearer. And they said, "Can you see blue?" And they were talking to me the whole time. "Can you see blue? You see blue skin?" I said, "Yes." And then I saw a big black eye. It was almost as if they were holding their face directly over me, like really close, like, "Look."
Mm.
And I saw a big black eye. And once I saw the eye, I lost it. I was completely horrified. And I started in my head, I started to scream, "No, no, 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 no. I don't want to see you. I don't want to see you. No, no, no. Stop, 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 stop. No, no, no." Like that. Because I got so scared. And then suddenly my eyesight completely clouded over. It totally unfocused immediately. And they said, "It's okay. You don't have to see us. We're not going to show you. You don't have to see us. It's okay." And then they said to me, they said, "You humans are so sick with fear." They said, "You're sick." And they said, "You're also," and I was sick at that time. Like it was around the time when I was getting sick very often. I had mononucleosis and other things going on. And they said, "We could help you, they said, but you have to give us permission." And I remember in my mind, I was so scared. I said, "Well, what does that mean? I have to give you permission? Like, what if I give you permission to do what? Like, what are you going to do?" And then they just went like, "So sick with fear." It was like that. "So sick with fear." It was like that.
Wow.
And then suddenly the blue blob kind of moved out of my, uh, the line of my eyesight. Like, it moved away. Whatever was in front of me moved away. It was like they were gone. I still couldn't move. I still couldn't focus my eyes. And then suddenly I moved my hands, my eyes focused back, and I sat up screaming. And my husband went, "Ah!"
And were you worried at all about the other members of your family?
In that moment, I was so terrified that I wasn't thinking of anything.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, there's this thing over me, and oh my God, what is happening?
And what did your husband say after?
He just said, "You had a bad dream."
Of course he did.
And I was like, that was no dream.
Wow. Now, when you look back at that, do you ever feel, and I know regrets aren't a good thing to have, would you do anything differently?
Oh, yes. I go through that conversation in my head over and over again. And I go, "Oh my goodness, I wish I could have actually seen what they look like. Oh my goodness, I wish I could have asked them where they were from. I wish I could have asked them this, that. I wish I could have given them permission to help me. I wish I could have not been so afraid."
Have you tried to make contact with them again?
Yes. And I have had nothing. I have had some experiences where I have had like kind of an out of body experience, and I see a craft over me and
Ooh.
I become scared again, but nothing where there are beings in front of me.
Has your OBE been a result of meditation?
I don't know what my
Out of body experience, sorry.
I don't think so. It could be, but you know what I really think it's the result of? When I was younger, I used to have a lot of sleep paralysis and a lot of insomnia during a certain time in my life where I was having a lot of things that now I link to this experience.
Right.
Between the ages of 9.5 or 10 to the age of just turning 13 is when they stopped. 12.5, 13. And they were continuous every night. And I think that because I had so much sleep paralysis and I was going into that state of mind, that's when my OBE started.
Okay, let's shuffle our way along over to the topic of tarot cards now. Just switch gears really quickly.
Oh, I wanted to say one last thing because I didn't answer the
By
question
all means.
about paranormal.
Oh, yes.
I believe that extraterrestrials are also, they travel interdimensionally. And I believe that when they travel interdimensionally, that I don't know, I'm not a scientist, the electromagnetic energy or whatever it is, time space is disturbed or stimulated, And then other things can happen as a result of that, like seeing replays of the past, or spirits or other things drift through back and forth.
All right. My understanding is that you have more than a spectator's interest in tarot. Tarot cards. Do you call it tarot?
Tarot, yes.
Tarot, okay.
Well, tarot is a system of 78 cards. And there's 22 major arcana, which are 22 cards that, well, people explain them in different ways, but I could say that they are, some people see them as 22 major universal archetypes, or 22 major themes in a spiritual journey or the hero's journey. And then there are 4 minor suits. And this all comes out of a card game that I'm not going to try to say because I might say it wrong. It's an old Italian card game, and that's where we get our regular playing cards from.
Is it tarocchi?
Yeah, it might be
Okay.
tarocchi.
Okay.
I hope that that's the way that you say it. I wasn't sure how you
Probably
say it.
not.
And then some people link it to older things from ancient Egypt. There's so many different ideas about it. To Kabbalah, they link it to Kabbalah because there are 22 Hebrew letters and 22 major arcana. There are 10 sefirot in Kabbalah, and there are 10 cards in each suit. Anyway, so it's a system of cards that people use for divination. People also use it, and how I like to use it as well, as inner inquiry. People do shadow work with it. People do meditations with the pictures. People journal with them. It's just this overall system that seems to really work well with the human psyche and really can be a tool of self-investigation. And
how did you come to be interested in that?
I was about 3 years old. My mother had a Rider-Waite tarot deck. That's for people that are into tarot. They'll know which deck that is. And she used to read for my aunt and her friends, and I just used to be amazed. I'd sit there very quietly and be so amazed that I saw my mother looking at these symbols and like them meaning something. And I was just like, whoa, that's so cool. Like, I want to know the secrets of those symbols. So
it's interesting to know that your mom was interested in that.
yes. Yes, she was.
Did she read or read for others?
She did.
Okay.
Grandmother did not, although her grandmother supposedly was some sort of medium and had a lot of paranormal activity in her house.
Your grandmother?
Her grandmother.
Oh, her grandmother. Yeah. Okay.
Not even my great-grandmother. It was my great-great-grandmother. Sorry, her grandmother's mother.
Her great-grandmother.
Yeah, her great-grandmother. Because both my grandmothers on both sides were skeptics. They were not into this, but my mother was. And according to her, my great-great-grandmother was as well. As soon as I got old enough, and also I remember it was my 10th birthday, especially when I was having so much paranormal activity, I got very interested in delving into tarot that I asked for them for my 10th birthday. And she got me my very first deck of cards on my 10th birthday.
Do you remember what your dad said?
What my father said about tarot?
Yeah.
My father was always very much into yoga and meditation and Buddhism, but he was not into the paranormal and he was not into tarot. He just didn't get it. He was an artist, so he liked the pictures, but beyond that, he didn't have an interest in it.
Is reading them, would you consider that esoteric, or do you think that anybody can, who has the desire to read, can read tarot?
Anyone who has the desire to read can read tarot. And I believe that that desire is there for a reason. If someone wants to read, anyone could learn how to read it. There are many different ways to read the cards, and some people are just naturally better at certain ways than other ways. In addition, some people might have some sort of psychic ability, as we could call it, just kind of that information coming out of nowhere that sometimes, and in different times in my life, because this would go up and down. There are times where I felt very turned on as it's called, where I would look at the cards and I'd simultaneously receive these sort of messages, just like I did with the channeling or dictating or the muse, and vision. I'd like scare myself or I'd surprise myself.
I'll term for now a lay person. And if they went, hey, that looks pretty interesting, but I don't think that, that I could read them. So they can do the, I guess, technical part of it. But
everyone could read it. And I think that also as you get into it and as you get into that creative part of your mind, I think everyone could surprise themselves. And I think that everyone has those moments of insight where something comes out of somewhere and someone's like, how did you know that? And you're like, I have no idea.
Okay. So there's many different types of decks, and I guess different people will do different types of spreads or layouts.
Yeah.
Why is that done?
If you like to think of a spread, it's kind of organizing your information. So some people don't use spreads at all, and they just pull cards and they start talking. Other people like spreads, like I said, because it organizes the information. So you can ask a question and you can gather different bits of information to answer your question. Like, for example, the most common Celtic cross that people out there, if they're interested in tarot, they probably know the Celtic cross spread. And you could gather information about the past, the present, the future, the underlying issue that's out of sight, the overall theme, what will most likely happen if you don't change, and all of those different things. So it gives you different aspects and different parts of the answer to your question. And like I said, it's almost like a calendar. People have said that, where it like organizes and separates out your information.
Do you have to formulate a question before you start flipping the cards or doing a spread or a layout?
That's the typical practice, yes, but also no. Some people just say, I just want to read the energy right now, or I just want to see what I need to know right now. But I do like working with a question. That's just me personally. I feel that the question is just as important as the answer.
So do people use those cards for their own personal use? And what I mean by that is, as opposed to reading for somebody or reading somebody else.
Yeah, people use it like that. Sometimes people pick a card of the day or what do I need to watch out for, or what do I have to look forward to today? Mostly when people are doing that, also they're also doing it to train their own psychic abilities. I like to look at it and use it for insight. Like I'm going to give you an example. So my mother passed away, and I had a lot of unresolved issues with my mother. So I used a mother deck to work through those issues because I no longer had her physically. So instead, I would look into these memories that I had with her that were not so positive and look for what it was to appreciate in those memories or the lesson to learn. And so I would do deeper journal work with that. So you can really look at it for personal insight and personal understanding. And that is my favorite way to use them. And that's how I use them with myself.
Would you say that tarot is similar to horoscopes?
It can be, and it can be completely different. And there are, I do a lot of shows with Julie Kushia Watts, my friend and tarot creator, where she has combined astrology and tarot together. So,
and where do you do that show?
On YouTube, on my channel, Lavender Moon.
Lavender Moon, YouTube. Okay, just so everybody knows. Okay. Now, do you have a deck or 2 decks of cards with you?
Yes, I have 3 decks right in front of me.
3 decks. Do you want to tell us a little bit about those decks and why you chose them?
Sure. Well, I have over 100 decks.
Okay.
Just so you know.
That's wild. All right.
So I grabbed the 3 that were out, and I'll tell you. So one of them, I also have the Tarot de Marseille Waite, because I'm a big fan of a particular deck, the Rider-Waite Tarot, or the Rider-Waite Smith Tarot. I used a single deck for many years of my reading until I got into collecting. I only had one deck, and it was this one. And this particular deck, they mixed with the artwork of the Marseille Tarot, which is an older rendition of the tarot deck. So it looks very medieval, and I just really like it. It's like the original one that I used, except the artwork is more medieval. So it's pretty cool. So I'm attracted to the artwork, and a lot of it is the artwork. Like, you choose the decks because you're attracted to the artwork. And the last one is by Chris Ann. I have the Light Seers Tarot just because it's so beautiful, so colorful. It was because I have the Tarot of the Abyss, which is black and white. It just made me want to pull the Light Seers Tarot also because it's so colorful and bright. So my grandfather built a cabinet that is like on stilts.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best way that I can call it, on stilts.
Mm-hmm.
So it is on stilts over my working desk, and it's like this large cabinet, and I stand on a little step stool, and it slides open, and I have all of my decks up there.
I was going to ask you if you could take a picture of the decks that you're using today, but maybe the cabinet would be nicer that we can put up on the show notes, or not. That's up to you. I'm just going to leave that out there.
Sure, yeah, I think I could take a pic. I'm wondering if I showed it. I must have showed it before somewhere on my channel, but yes, I can take a picture of it.
Okay, and with a little blurb about your grandfather, when he built it and when you came in possession of it, and that kind of information, I think would be interesting too. Yeah, that'll be nice. So okay, so you picked those decks.
Okay, well, what kind of reading did you want me to do? Or just like pull a card and tell you how I'm reading it?
Yeah, let's get your intuition on this. Pull a card, and if that's one of the techniques that you use, then yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I'll kind of explain as I'm doing it. Well,
sure.
I'm just pulling the Tarot of the Abyss. It's in my hand, so let's use that. So first thing I do, I'm going to talk it as I'm doing, is I'm shuffling. I shuffle, right?
Okay.
And as I'm shuffling, I really want to shuffle in my question. Like, I'm shuffling it into the cards. And my question right now is just, yeah, sometimes when something flips out, I pull it out. So I'll tell you what. So I pulled the Four of Swords. And in this deck, what I see is there's this old stone wall, and there are brick wall, and there are these swords that are lying there with a helmet. And there are these two birds on top of the helmet. So typically the Four of Swords is kind of like a resting place. But for me, this is more like in this moment. So basically, you see the image and you start to talk about what you get from the image. That's one way to do it. So kind of like laying down the battle or whatever it is that you were fighting over, like giving it a rest. Sometimes a line could come to you, like give it a rest. Or it could be a saying that comes to you. Now with the same card, I could also look at it and I could turn it into a question, and I could ask myself that question, or I could ask you, and I could say, what is something, like choose your battles, what is something that you could, kind of lay down to rest, something that you don't need to hold anymore, to argue over anymore? What is something that you could let go and maybe put to rest, or what needs to be put to rest? So that's how I could either read it by saying what that picture means, or I could go deeper into myself and inquire by turning it into a question.
The other two decks, can you do the same with them? A shuffle. I don't know if you shuffle, split, knock. And some people knock.
Some people knock. There's no wrong way, really.
Right. And what about upside down? Now, some people will go, oh, it's upside down. And other people will go, they won't give any credence to that. They'll just be like, look, it just turned that way. It doesn't mean anything to me.
Right. Some people ignore it. Some people use upside down as the opposite meaning. Some people use it as a resistance to what is happening. And some people use it as the energy is turning inward instead of being expressed outward.
How do you use it, Amber?
And I use it as a mixture of those. It depends on that moment. So like if I were to pull the Four of Swords upside down, I might say, okay, maybe is there something that I need to put to rest, but I'm like really holding on to it. So you want me to pull something from each of these? Okay.
Yeah, to see if the energies or the messaging, not that it has to be the same, but that would be intriguing for me.
So I'm pulling from the Tarot de Marseille now. I'm asking the same thing. Like with one card kind of stuck up and this is interesting though, because this is the Seven of Swords. And that's interesting that I pulled swords from both decks. And swords can really have to do with worries or concerns. So this has to do with a concern or a worry. The energy could just be repeating what I was just talking about, but, which is kind of funny. So now I'm pulling from the third deck, and I have the Wheel. This is a major arcana card, which is a major archetype. It's also, it could be a theme. And so if I put this as the theme or the context that we're talking about, is the Wheel can be talking about change. And that kind of puts the whole thing into perspective with the hoarding that I just said, that there can be a fear of things changing, and that making it mean that you're afraid of losing everything. And so it creates a tendency to hoard. So if I would have put this all together.
Okay. So that is that what you feel the reading is speaking to you, is saying to you?
Yeah, it could be money fears as well. It doesn't have to be like hoarding physical objects, but it's like a fear of, and it could also even be people, but there's some sort of theme of change and this needing to hold on to things and keep them.
Is that more like just a statement is what I guess what I'm...
It's more of you could put it as a statement or a question. So it's more like a statement, like this is the energy right now.
Okay. Well, that is interesting. I really appreciate you doing that and taking the time to do that for me. I wrote that down, but of course I always have the podcast to go back to. Yeah. So I will follow through on that and give that some thought. It's food for thought for me. That's great. Amber, I want to thank you so very much for taking your time out. I know you have a busy schedule, so thanks for joining us. And I really enjoyed this, what I'll call an eclectic chat with you. Yeah. So it was. So if the listeners would like to reach out, what are some of the platforms where they can connect with you?
They could go to Lavender Moon on YouTube. They could also go to Facebook, and they could go to Lavender Moon Circle, which is a private Facebook group for people who are into these subjects and who follow my channel. And there are some questions there that I ask, and you have to answer all of the questions, and we'll let you in. I just put those questions there to make sure that it's real people.
Sure.
And not just bots or fake accounts.
Sure. I thank you very much and appreciate all your time and appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Kelly Jo. This has been such a pleasure, and I thank you for having me on your channel, on your podcast.
I thank you. It is I that thanks you very much. Yeah, really appreciate that. All right, I will let you go to enjoy your evening, what's left of it. And yeah, take care of yourself.
Thank you, Kelly Jo.
Okay, we'll talk to you later.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye, Amber. Bye-bye. I would like to keep this cast a commercial-free zone. In light of that, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channels. All my orb videos are available by using the handle @Spirit Orb Sightings, or visit my new channel with the handle @Orbicle Times Podcast. If you've already subscribed, many thanks. For blogs, episodes, show notes, bios, images, and video, please visit www.orbicletimes.com. If you enjoyed an episode, then please give a like or a share on Anchor, Spotify, Apple, or whatever podcatcher you happen to use. If you've already done so, much appreciated. Thank you for taking your time to visit these Orbicle Times. Orbicle Times Podcast is written, produced, edited, and hosted by me, Kelly Jo, at Studio Spare Room.